Welcome to Learning the Bible in the Land of the Bible. In March of 2013, I had the wonderful opportunity of traveling to Israel with Dr. Harry Reeder, senior pastor of Briarwood Presbyterian Church in Birmingham, Alabama, to learn the Bible at the locations where the events actually occurred. I'm excited to share my experience with you through the videos I recorded on our journey. It is my prayer that the message you're about to hear will encourage you in your walk with Christ. But if Jesus is not the Lord of your life, I pray that today you will come to know Him as your Lord and Savior.
Today we travel to the city of Jerusalem, to the pool of Bethesda, where is recorded in chapter 5 of the Gospel of John, verses 1 through 17, Jesus healed an invalid. Many skeptics of the modern era have argued against the historical accuracy of the Gospel of John because no evidence of the Bethesda pool existed. And further, the idea of a five-sided pool was seen as a symbolic invention representing the 5 books of Moses. In the 1880s, the site was unearthed, but it was not until the 1950s that it was fully understood to be the site referenced in the 5th chapter of John. The excavations revealed that the pool was actually 2 pools with a central dam separating them, thereby explaining John's description of 5 roofed colonnades. The identification of the site had been made difficult by numerous factors. First, the site is located in a populous urban area. Second, the site had probably not escaped the decimation of Jerusalem in AD 70 by the Roman general Titus. Third, a Byzantine basilica was constructed there in the 5th century, commemorating the event. The basilica straddled the central dam, and several arches supporting the basilica were erected upward from the bottom of the pools. The basilica was destroyed by the invading Persians in 614 AD, with its masonry ending up in the pool. After the Crusaders conquered the city in 1099, a chapel was built over a portion of the former basilica. At the time of our visit, the bases of the arches which had supported the Byzantine basilica were readily visible, as well as steps with landings, which were used by the bathers for lowering themselves into the pool.
Well, now you're down to the pool of Bethesda, and this is an event that happened during the feast. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, a pool, in Aramaic called Bethesda. By the way, this is in John 5. It has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and knew that he had already been there for a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I'm going, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed." That's a remarkable moment, isn't it? But he answered them, "The man who healed me, that man said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in the place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more. Nothing worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. And this was why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I am working." Well, this is one of those moments that's really extremely jam-packed with all kind of insights. First of all, the man is here. He's been an invalid 38 years, and there is a superstition that had developed in the area that the angel would stir up the waters, and when the angel stirred up the waters, then that was the first one into the pool would get healed. And so that's pretty tough to be the first one in the pool when you're an invalid. And nobody was going to sit around and wait and say, oh, it's just stirred up, let's all wait this time, and maybe the next time. So, he was there with his hope and superstition, and really hopeless in terms of being healed, because of not only the superstition, but also his incapacity to take advantage of even what was a false hope. And Jesus sees him, and Jesus sovereignly makes the declaration that he is going to heal him. He realizes, Jesus is fully realizing this man's been there for a number of years, and so he heals him. He tells him to take up his bed and walk. Well, he did so. He took up his bed just as he was told, and he began to walk. Now, by the way, just a few insights into biblical healing. Healing was done as a sign, wonder, and miracle. The Bible uses this phrase, sign, wonder, and miracle. Basically, miracles are when God shows up with supernatural power, overruling the order of natural law that he has put in place. And when he removes his supernatural, powerful presence for that miracle, everything goes back as it was. It's not like all of a sudden that becomes a place of miracles because he did a miracle there. No, everything goes back as it was when he removes his hand. Another way to think about it is Jesus did miracles, and they allowed the prophets to do miracles and the apostles to do miracles as a sign of their special relationship with God for the communication of biblical truth and for the recognition that God was doing a significant thing in their time. So at Pentecost, you have these miracles of people speaking in languages that were not theirs, that the people there could understand. You find it repeated when the gospel goes to Judea and Samaria. You find it repeated when it goes to the world. You find the Bible, you'll see these miracles cluster in the days of Moses, in the days of Elijah, in the days of Jesus, in the days of the establishment of the New Testament church. They're clustering as God is bringing attention to what he is doing in the unfolding of the calendar of redemption. And when someone had miracle-working ability, that meant that they had a special relationship with God. That's why Paul, what church defied Paul as an apostle? Which church questioned his apostolic ministry? Corinth. And so in 2 Corinthians he said, did I not do the signs, wonders, and miracles of an apostle? Hebrews says God confirmed them with signs, wonders, and miracles. So God does miracles on purpose. They're not just for the momentary excitement. They're there for a purpose. In fact, signs, wonders, and miracles is kind of the cue. Miracle is a supernatural work of power. Signs, wonders, miracle. Let's work it backwards. The miracle creates a wonder, and a wonder is there to signify something. So sign, wonder, and miracle. Well, Jesus does one here. Now, certainly, a secondary issue is his compassion for the man who is healed. But there are even bigger fish to fry in this. Number one is the man's redemption. He tells him to go sin no more. Now, some people would interpret that meant the reason he was an invalid is because he had sinned. Well, that may or may not be the case. Now, the reason he's an invalid is because of sin. You don't find invalidism until sin comes. But it doesn't always have to be associated with the person that has it, or their parents necessarily. But the only reason that disease and death and all of that's here is because of sin. But what he is saying, don't sin no more, is he is telling him, he is bringing him to the work of redemption in his life. He said, lest something much greater befall you. And he is telling him to leave his sin and come to him to trust in salvation. What is something greater than being an invalid your entire life? Well, one thing that would certainly be greater is to fall under the judgment of God when you could have salvation. And so that's what he is pointing at in the text. But the other thing that happens within the text is that when he takes up his bed and walks in obedience to Jesus, they immediately get upset. And the Jews, there's not, praise the Lord, he's walking. What are you doing carrying your bed? Well, I don't know. All I know is a while ago I couldn't. This guy healed me, and then he told me to take up the bed. I took the healing, and I took the bed. And so here I am, and I'm going. And they said, well, who was it that told you that? And he said, well, and then all of a sudden he realizes Jesus wasn't there in the crowd. It sounds like later on the day where you were at the temple, Jesus sees him and seeks him out. And he continues the work of redemption in his life personally. And then we began to see something about the Pharisees who were upset with Jesus because he had healed on the Sabbath. And Jesus has done all of this to make an even bigger point. Now here's the bigger point of all that we've just already said. The bigger point is this. He says, my Father is working, and I am. Now, according to the book of Genesis, God created for 6 days, and then he what? So it was utter blasphemy to say that God was working. But of course we know God is working because God rested not from working, but he rested from his work of creation. He continues 2 other works. He continues his work of providence, upholding the creation by the word of his power, and he then initiates the work of redemption, that whereby he is going to save sinners. And my Father is working, and I am. And deliberately he is again using the name of deity, I am, and the Father's working in providence and redemption. How is the Father accomplishing providence and redemption? Through Christ, the preeminence of Christ, who is upholding all things by the word of his power, and who now has come to save his people from their sins. And he will come and do that work. So, by the way, that's reflected in our observance of, quote unquote, the Christian Sabbath or the Lord's Day. You know, Jesus teaches us to set it aside for worship. Don't do common labor. But is there a need for a mercy ministry? Absolutely. Are there works of necessity? Yes. So God rested from creation, work of necessity, providence, and the work of mercy and grace to redeem us. Does that connect some dots for you there? So now Jesus comes, and now all of this ties back into what? Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. Remember when I told you Jesus is the Lord of the feast? When he was in the temple, they asked him, by what did he do this? He said, this is my Father's house. I'm the inheritor. I am the Lord of the temple. I am the temple. And now the Sabbath, you're questioning as to whether I can continue the works of grace and mercy and providence on the Sabbath. I am the Lord of the Sabbath. And I am has come to accomplish the work of the Father in providence and redemption. And the miracle that was done to point these things out was done right back over here where they've uncovered a part of the pool of Bethesda. Okay? Anybody have any questions? Or?